They told me I was half the woman my sister was, so I showed them what half could buy. $84,000 worth of silence. I sat at the edge of my parents' polished oak table, smoothing the wrinkles out of my simple black dress. It wasn't fancy, but it cost more than I should have spent. Still, tonight, I needed that extra bit of armor. Something that made me feel like I belonged in this room. The chandelier light bounced off crystal glasses as my father poured wine that probably cost what I spent on groceries in a week. He lifted his glass, beaming. "To Sam's incredible win," he announced proudly. "The youngest attorney in her firm's history to win a case like that. Thanks for watching." No eyes the ready for. Within my noun. Everyone clapped, especially my mother, who reached across the table to squeeze Sam's hand. "We always knew you were destined for greatness," she said, glowing with pride. Sam gave a modest little smile, the kind that came with practice, the kind of smile that said, "I'm humble. But yes. I know I'm amazing." Her blonde hair fell perfectly around her face. "It was just good preparation," she murmured. "And a bit of natural talent, I guess. Don't downplay your gifts," Mom added quickly. I took a small sip of water and tried to join in. "The article I read about your case mentioned how you connected with the jury. That emotional intelligence," but Dad cut me off, not even glancing my way. "Did you tell them about the judge's comments, Samantha? Tell them what he said afterward." My voice died before I could finish. It always happened like this familiar ritual where Sam shone like a diamond, and I faded quietly into the wallpaper. I focused on my breathing, on the cool weight of the fork in my hand. Anything to stay grounded as the conversation flowed right past me. Finally, after 20 minutes, Mom looked at me. "Kylie, pass the potatoes." I handed them over, feeling stupidly grateful for being spoken to. Then I tried again, hoping this time maybe they'd listen. "My department's rolling out a new compliance system that I helped design. Did I mention Sam's firm is considering her for junior partner?" Mom interrupted, her voice rising with excitement. "At 32. Can you imagine?" My throat tightened. I was 29, only 3 years younger than my brilliant sister, but somehow in their eyes, I was always decades behind. Then Mom turned that look on me, the one that always came before a helpful suggestion. "You know, Kylie, if you'd finished that MBA instead of stopping at your bachelor's, you might be further along by now." The MBA I postponed when they called me sobbing about their foreclosure notice. The degree that's still sitting in the someday folder while my savings drain month after month. "I'm doing fine," I said quietly. "I manage." Mom sighed and exchanged a look with Dad. "Fine isn't exceptional though, is it?" She set her fork down with surgical precision. "Honestly, Kylie, you're not even half the woman your sister is." The words hit like a punch to the gut. The room went silent. Even the antique clock on the mantel seemed to stop ticking. My heart hammered in my chest. My hands trembled around my water glass. I could feel the heat rising in my neck. Her words sank in heavy, final, and cruel. Then the clock started again. Tick, 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 and something inside me shifted. 4 years of silence. 4 years of sacrifice. 4 years of being invisible. I looked straight at them. "Then let her pay the mortgage for this house," I said quietly. The air froze. Dad's fork clattered against his plate. "Mortgage?" he said, his voice cracking. "What mortgage?" Sam's champagne glass stopped halfway to her lips. Mom's face went pale. "Kylie," she whispered. "This is hardly dinner conversation. Who wants dessert?" I made apple pie. "No." My voice was steady now, stronger than I expected. I pulled my phone from my purse, opened my banking app, and scrolled. My fingers trembled, but not from fear anymore. "What are you doing?" Dad demanded. "We refinanced years ago, February 15th, 2021. I said, showing them my screen. $2,500 to prevent foreclosure. "Just this once, that's what you said." Mom stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. I'm getting dessert." "March. April. May." I continued, scrolling through the records. "Every month for 4 years. Between $1,200 and $2,400. Depending on what crisis came up." Dad's expression hardened. "We've had some temporary setbacks in the business, you know that." "Temporary?" I looked up. 4 years isn't temporary. Then I turned to Sam, whose confusion was melting into something like horror. "Did you know that while you were buying your condo and getting promotions, I was keeping our parents from losing their house?" Sam shook her head slowly. "They told me they were helping you financially, that you were struggling." A bitter laugh escaped me. "Is that what they told you? A daughter supports her family," Mom said tearfully as she came back without the dessert. "That's how we raised you. Family comes first. Always. Family comes first," I repeated. "But I'm not really family, am I? I'm an ATM. The safety net." The invisible backup plan. The realization burned through me. All those years I'd tried to measure up. Tried to make myself smaller. And for what? So they could drain me dry while praising Sam for the life my sacrifices helped make possible. Sam's voice was quiet. How much, Kylie? Total. I met her eyes. $84,000. Dad choked on his wine. That's ridiculous. But his voice faltered. Because he knew. They all knew. My down payment for a home, my MBA, my future. The room went silent again, but this time, the silence wasn't heavy with shame, it was heavy with truth. And beneath the anger, something strange and new started to bloom. Freedom. That night, back in my apartment. Memories hit me like flashes of lightning. I was lying in bed, nearly asleep when my phone rang at 11:37 p.m. Mom's name lit up the screen. Kylie. Her voice was breaking, thick with tears. I didn't know who else to call. I sat up instantly. What's wrong? Is someone hurt? It's the house, she sobbed. We're going to lose the house. The next few minutes blurred together words like missed payments, foreclosure, 30 days, auction steps. I was already opening my laptop, logging into my bank account. The glow of the screen illuminated the total. I'd saved 3 years of overtime, skipped dinners, and brown bag lunches, my down payment fund. My chance at a condo in Denver. How much? I asked. Just $2,500, Mom whispered. Just to stop the foreclosure process. Your father swears the Brewster contract will come through next month. Honey, I wouldn't ask if we had any other option. I hesitated for only a second. Then I clicked. Transfer. $2,500 gone in an instant. The numbers slid down like an elevator in free fall. Thank you, sweetheart. Mom said, her voice suddenly calm again. We raised such a good girl. Dad got on the phone too. Won't happen again, Kylie Bear. Just a tough month. I recognized that tone, the same one he used when canceled trips or broken promises were brushed off with a smile. I stared at the screen long after the call ended, a hollow ache in my stomach. Just this once. 3 weeks later, Mom called again. The bank made a mistake, she said. It's just $1,200 this time. I transferred it. A month later. Your father's client is late paying, but the business will bounce back soon. Another transfer. By the 6th month, I'd stopped waiting for explanations. I stopped expecting repayment. I set up an automatic transfer $1,500 directly to their mortgage company. It was easier than the phone calls. Easier than the guilt trips. Then one afternoon at work, my email pinged. Denver downtown condos pre-sale opportunity. Perfect location. Within my price range, just 10% down. I checked my savings. After 6 months of helping, I was right back where I started. The condo units sold out within 48 hours. That night, I deferred my MBA acceptance. Again, financial circumstances. I wrote on the form. The university said they'd hold my spot for 1 more year. I made a spreadsheet. Columns for dates, amounts, running totals. Another tab for opportunities lost: condo, education, wedding trip. 6 months became a year. A year became 2. During lunch breaks, I ate instant ramen in the office kitchen while my phone buzzed with Instagram notifications. Mom posting pictures from upscale restaurants. Anniversary dinner. Blessed. He watching getting the rest her friends. Dad's new golf clubs leaning against the wall behind them. Meanwhile, I texted my friends. Can't make it this weekend. Tight on cash. By summer's end they stopped asking. When I applied for a new credit card, I got denied. Insufficient credit history, the email said. The same day, Sam posted a photo of her condo closing. Homeowner at last. Number adulting. At Easter dinner, Mom said, your sister's always had such a good head on her shoulders. Financial independence is a sign of maturity. I nodded and swallowed both the irony and the instant mashed potatoes. At work, Jessica from accounting slid into the chair beside me. You okay? You've been brown bagging it for months, she said gently. Just saving. I lied automatically. She studied me for a long second. For what? Because you never seem to buy anything. Something in her tone cracked my shell. Over coffee, the story came spilling out. 4 years. $84,000. Jessica set down her mug with a soft thud. Kylie, she said. You can't set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. They're my parents, I whispered. And you're their daughter, she said firmly. Not their bank. Then she pulled a napkin toward her and uncapped her pen. Let's do the math. The ready. She calculated everything, not just the money, but the lost time, the missed investments, the delayed career moves. When she was done, my hands were shaking. They wouldn't understand, I said. Maybe not, Jessica replied. But do you understand what you're giving up? That night, I stared at my phone, thumb hovering over the automatic transfer. 4 years. $84,000. I wasn't ready to press cancel, but for the first time, I could imagine doing it. Just this once, I thought. I could skip 1 month, see if they noticed, see if they cared. The glow of my phone screen was the only light in my apartment that night. It was 5:48 a.m. and I still hadn't slept. For 4 years, I'd transferred between $1,200 and $2,400 every single month to my parents' money that should have built my future. $84,000. That was the down payment I could have used when Denver's real estate prices were still manageable. The MBA I'd deferred again and again. The retirement fund that could have been growing with compound interest. Instead, I'd spent it saving a house that wasn't mine for people who, just last night, told me I wasn't even half the woman my sister was. My thumb hovered over the button. Cancel recurring transfer? My stomach twisted. My heart pounded. Am I really going to do this? I hit confirm. A chill ran through me. My body felt like it was falling, like I jumped off a cliff without knowing what was below. But beneath the panic, something else stirred. Relief. Deep, pure relief. For the first time in 4 years, my next paycheck would be mine. The first call came before I finished my morning coffee. Dad. I let it go to voicemail. Kylie. His voice barked, tight and angry. What you did last night was inexcusable. We've supported you your entire life, and this is how you repay us? By abandoning your family when we need you most? Call me back immediately. Delete. By noon, Mom had left 4 messages, each one more tearful than the last. Delete. By 3 p.m., I blocked them both. At 5 p.m. my phone buzzed again. It was Sam. Sam. They say you're punishing them. What's going on? They won't stop calling me. Me. Ask them about the mortgage payments I've been making for 4 years. 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then came back. Finally. Sam. I'm so sorry, I had no idea. At 6:14 that evening, the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw my mother standing there, clutching a photo album to her chest. I pressed my forehead against the door. I couldn't open it. Kylie, honey. She called softly. I know you're in there. I brought pictures from when you were little. Remember your first ballet recital? When you fell and your father carried you off stage? I did remember. But what I remembered more was working 3 jobs in college while Sam's tuition was fully paid for. Postponing grad school to help with their temporary financial setback. Sacrificing everything for people who didn't even see me. I didn't open the door. By the next morning, the family campaign had begun. My aunt in Phoenix called, worried about my poor parents. Then an uncle from Michigan emailed to remind me that family responsibility is sacred. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly wanted to check on me. This nutty question. It was like watching a coordinated military operation, the Guilt Brigade. When I told Jessica over coffee, she just nodded knowingly. They're good, she said. They've got the flying monkeys out. The what? The Wizard of Oz. The witch never gets her hands dirty. She sends flying monkeys to do her bidding. Classic manipulation tactic when the direct guilt doesn't work. They send others to pressure you. I stared at her, half in disbelief, half in awe. You really know this stuff. I've lived it, she said simply. That was the moment I realized she wasn't just my coworker. She was the first person who really saw me. I made an appointment. I told her later that week. With who? A financial advisor. Jessica grinned. Good. That's step 1 toward freedom. The financial advisor's office smelled like leather and lemon polish. Martha, a woman in her 50s with sharp glasses and calm eyes, looked through my paperwork. $84,000 over 4 years, she repeated slowly. Then she set down her tablet. And they never disclosed this to your sister? No. And you had no legal obligation to pay their mortgage? No. Her expression softened, but her tone didn't. Then what you've experienced is financial exploitation. The word hit me like a slap. Exploitation. I had called it duty, love, family. But hearing someone say it out loud stripped away the illusion. Family exploitation is still exploitation, Kylie, she said firmly. You deserve better. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. Then I nodded. Let's build you a personal budget, Martha continued. One that prioritizes your future. We spent the next hour running projections, where I could be in 5 years if I stopped sending those payments. The numbers made me cry. Retirement savings that actually grew. A down payment fund that didn't drain away. A college fund for future children if I ever chose to have any. This, she said gently, is what financial health looks like. The next morning, I opened my first investment account with the $1,400 I would have sent to my parents. The simple act of clicking deposit felt like planting a flag in foreign territory. This money is mine. This future is mine. That afternoon, I re-enrolled in the graduate program I had deferred 7 times. Welcome back, Miss Anderson, the admissions counselor said warmly. We've held your spot. For the first time in years, I felt like I was walking towards something, not running from it. 3 weeks passed. The phone calls from extended family started to fade. Even Sam's texts grew softer, more careful. But my parents, they alternated between radio silence and new attempts to reach me. I knew this wasn't over, so I practiced what I'd say when it was. Jessica helped me write it down. I rehearsed it in front of my bathroom mirror every night. I love you. But your mortgage is not my responsibility. Simple. Direct. Impossible to twist. The knock came on a Sunday evening. 3 sharp raps, my father's signature knock. I opened the door. Both of them stood there, looking smaller somehow. Mom's eyes were red. Dad's jaw was clenched tight. "This has gone on long enough," he said, stepping past me into my apartment. "You've made your point." Mom followed, trying to touch my arm. I stepped back. "Your behavior is destroying this family." Dad continued, pacing. "Do you have any idea what people are saying? Your Aunt Margaret thinks you're having a breakdown." "Charles," Mom whispered, a warning in her tone. "No, Elaine, she needs to hear this," he snapped. "You've embarrassed us, Kylie. You've created a crisis over a little financial help any daughter would provide without question." I stared at him. $84,000 isn't a little help. There were mustelity was autuity. With that for his beak subrected Makin. "You're killing us with this betrayal," Mom said softly, tears sliding down her cheeks. "After everything we've done for you." My rehearsed speech vanished. All that remained was something raw and real. "I love you both," I said. "But your mortgage is not my responsibility. It never was." Dad's face turned crimson. "So that's it? You're just abandoning us?" "I'm not abandoning you," I said quietly. "I'm finally stopping the abandonment of myself." The silence that followed was deafening. They left 7 minutes later, Mom crying. Dad furious. When the door closed behind them, I slid to the floor. The sobs came hard, shaking, uncontrollable grief, guilt, anger, and something else I hadn't felt in years. Release. For the first time, I wasn't the one apologizing. That night, I slept 8 uninterrupted hours, the first full night of rest I'd had in 4 years. And when I woke up, sunlight was streaming through my blinds. Denver looked different. The skyline, the noise, the air, it all felt new. For the first time since that night 4 years ago, when I'd answered that desperate call about the mortgage, I felt the contours of my own life taking shape again. I wasn't half the woman anyone else was. I was whole. The next morning, I woke up smiling. 6 months ago, I would have started my day checking my bank app, calculating how much I could spend on coffee after the automatic transfer cleared. Today, I stretched, yawned, and stared at my ceiling and grinned. The promotion email had arrived the day before. "Project team lead. Your dedication and analytical skills make you the perfect candidate," my boss had said, shaking my hand. "The department recognizes your contributions, Kylie." Recognition. That word felt heavy in the best way. I'd spent years being invisible. Now people actually saw me. I pulled on my running shoes and stepped outside, greeting Mrs. Winters, my neighbor, walking her corgi. "Big day for your Italian cooking class, right?" she called out. "The final dinner." I laughed. "Lasagna from scratch. I promised to bring her leftovers." 6 months ago, I wouldn't have known her name. I wouldn't have had time, energy, or money for a class. But this version of me, she was alive again. My phone buzzed as I jogged. "Jessica. The hiking group's meeting at Boulder Creek on Saturday. You in?" "Absolutely," I said, smiling. The mountains had become my therapy. Standing at the summit, shouting into the wind, letting go of the years of silence. When I got back home, there was an envelope in my mailbox. Thick. Official. I opened it right there in the hallway, my hands shaking. "Dear Miss Anderson, we are pleased to inform you of your acceptance. The graduate program. The one I'd deferred for 4 years." I pressed the letter to my chest. Tears blurred my vision. I had done it. I was coming back to my life. But then, just when peace started to settle in, the phone rang again. My Aunt Gloria. "Kylie, your father asked me to call. The doctor's worried about his blood pressure. The stress from the possible foreclosure. The mortgage is current through next month," I interrupted. I checked. A pause. Then a sigh. "He mentioned there might be a misunderstanding about family obligations." "No misunderstanding," I said firmly. "I love you, Aunt Gloria. Tell Dad I wish him well." And I hung up. That night, I scrolled through Facebook. Mom's latest post was pinned to the top of my feed. "Heartbroken when children abandon parents who sacrificed everything for them. Family should be forever." 17 comments. All sympathetic. None of them knew the truth. I closed the app, and turned instead to my email. A new message from Sam. "They're saying worrying things about money. Are they really facing foreclosure? I'm confused." I took a deep breath and typed back. "They have options. They're just unwilling to consider them. I'm happy to explain everything if you want to hear my side. I hit send. Then I got ready for work. Because today, I was leading the morning briefing on the new compliance system. My system. When I entered the meeting room, the team went silent. 6 months ago, I'd have assumed they were judging me. But this time, I recognized what it was. Respect. The implementation numbers are impressive, said Thomas, our director. Kylie's design has reduced processing time by 32%. Real applause followed. Not polite claps. Real, genuine appreciation. And as I stood there, smiling, something clicked. This was what being seen felt like. That afternoon, my desk phone rang. An unfamiliar number flashed across the screen. Hello? Kylie Anderson? The voice on the other end was professional, smooth. This is Marissa Johnson from Parker Executive Search. I'm calling about a director position in Seattle. I blinked. I'm sorry, what? Your name came highly recommended, she continued. We were very impressed with your compliance system design. The position's with Westlake Financial Technologies. Would you be interested in discussing it further? My mouth went dry. Seattle, a whole new city, a 45% salary increase. Equity. I grabbed a notepad and jotted everything down. Yes, I said, my voice trembling. I'd be very interested. When I hung up, I just sat there for a moment, stunned. Seattle, 3 states away from the orbit of my parents. A chance to start again. That evening, I opened my laptop and scheduled a virtual tour with a Seattle realtor. The screen filled with an image of a high-rise unit, floor-to-ceiling windows, sunlight spilling onto polished floors, the Space Needle in the distance. What's the price range? I asked cautiously. She named a figure that would have made my stomach drop 6 months ago. But now, with no mortgage payments draining my account, it was doable. I opened a spreadsheet and started running numbers. 2 years of my new salary in Seattle would equal 4 years of what I'd given my parents. 4 years of invisible sacrifice. Traded for the chance to live free. The phone buzzed again. Sam. I talked to Dad. He admitted everything. 4 years of you paying their mortgage while they told me you were struggling. They took advantage of you, Kylie. I'm so sorry I didn't see it. For a second, I couldn't breathe. That was all I'd ever wanted. Not money, not validation, just for someone in my family to finally see me. Me. It's not your fault. Sam. Are you really considering Seattle? They're furious you didn't tell them first. I laughed softly. Seattle feels right. I typed back. I'm ready for something bigger than myself. That weekend, I started packing my Denver apartment. Every item went through one question. Does this serve my future? Or anchor me to the past? The donation pile grew higher and higher. Furniture, clothes, books, all symbols of a life built around survival, not choice. My phone pinged again. An email from Westlake Financial. Subject. Contract ready for signature. Benefits begin. Day 1. Relocation assistance included. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I opened the document and signed my name. A month later, I stood at the panoramic window of my new condo in Seattle, watching dawn paint Mount Rainier in pink and gold. 14 floors above the city, I sipped coffee that cost more than I'd ever have allowed myself before, and I didn't feel guilty. The apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the espresso machine and the distant sounds of the city waking up. Then my phone buzzed. Another text from Mom. We're managing without your help, she wrote. But it's been hard. I didn't respond. The second buzz came right after, this time from Grace, my old neighbor in Denver. Thought you should see this. Sorry. There was an image attached. The photo loaded slowly, pixel by pixel, as if the phone was warning me. When the image finally appeared, I felt my chest tighten. It was my parents' house, and across the front lawn, a banner stretched wide over the porch railings. Congratulations, Sam, for saving the family home. My coffee cup slipped from my hand, shattering against the hardwood floor. Hot liquid splashed across my bare feet, but I barely noticed. 4 years. $84,000. And now, they were crediting her for saving the house. I sank to the floor, palms pressed against the cold wood. Rage flooded my veins, so sharp it made my vision blur. They hadn't just erased me, they'd rewritten history. When I could finally breathe again, I stood up and went straight to my laptop. Bank statements, transfer confirmations, text from Mom, just this once, we'll pay you back soon. I printed everything, page after page after page, until the printer whirred and clicked, spitting out the proof of their lies. Then I forwarded every document to my personal email and to a new backup account I'd created just for this. Digital receipts of betrayal. The phone rang again. Sam's name flashed on the screen. Have you seen it? She asked before I could speak. The banner? Yes. Kylie, I swear I had nothing to do with it. They told everyone at church that I've been making their mortgage payments since you abandoned them. I laughed, a short, bitter sound. Of course they did. There's more, Sam said softly. They're hosting a family appreciation dinner next weekend, to honor my sacrifice. I stared at the wall. They're throwing you a party? Yes. They sent out invitations this afternoon. As soon as I hung up, my email pinged again. It was there, a cream-colored digital invitation with flowing script. Join us in celebrating Samantha's selfless dedication to family values. My voicemail buzzed right after. Mom's voice. Kylie, honey, we hope you can set aside our differences to celebrate your sister. Family should support each other in times of recognition. Family should support each other. The irony almost made me laugh. I traced my finger over the date on the invitation. Next Saturday. I could have ignored it. I could have stayed quiet, again. But something inside me said, no more. I called Jessica. They're crediting Sam for paying the mortgage, I said. They're hosting a party about it. She was silent for a moment. Then, what are you going to do? I stared at my laptop. Tell the truth. Saturday evening, I stood on their front porch for the first time in nearly a year. Inside, laughter and classical music floated through the open windows, my father's signature playlist, always curated for maximum impressiveness. I was wearing a tailored charcoal suit that fit like armor. The folder under my arm was thick with printed records. Inside my laptop bag was a flash drive labeled, Truth. Sam opened the door before I could knock. You came, she whispered, her eyes wide. Did you think I wouldn't? I asked. She stepped aside, revealing the transformed living room flowers they couldn't afford. Catering from the most expensive restaurant downtown, a projector showing a slideshow titled, The Anderson Family Legacy of Support. My mother spotted me first. Her champagne glass froze mid-air. Kylie, what a surprise, she said. That bright, brittle tone she used for uncomfortable social moments. We weren't sure if you'd make it, what with your busy new life. That is last their fame. There save not everyone and everyone silence. Dad turned, his fake smile slipping when he saw my expression. Pumpkin, he said cautiously. Come in. We're just about to toast your sister's incredible generosity. The room fell quiet as I walked toward the projector. Aunts, uncles, cousins, church friends, all watching. I set my folder down on a side table. May I add something to the presentation? I asked evenly. Dad hesitated, then nodded, still trying to maintain control. Of course, our younger daughter wants to honor her sister too. How wonderful. I plugged in my flash drive. The slideshow on the projector blinked, then shifted. A new title appeared. 48 months. $84,000. Kylie. Hey said then no weed. What's this? Mom asked sharply. The truth, I said. The first slide showed my spreadsheet rows of dates, amounts, and partial account numbers. Payment descriptions, mortgage transfer, property tax, insurance premium. I don't think this is appropriate dinner conversation, Mom snapped, stepping forward. Neither is lying to your entire social circle, I replied calmly, clicking to the next slide. Text messages appeared on the screen magnified for everyone to read. Mom. Kylie, we're desperate. Just this once. Mom. Your father's business will recover soon. Help us through this month. Mom. Family comes first. Always. Murmurs spread across the room. Aunt Martha covered her mouth. Uncle Pete shifted uncomfortably in his seat. You're publicly humiliating us. Dad hissed, his face crimson. If the truth embarrasses you, I said evenly, that's not my fault. The next slide displayed Dad's business expense reports side by side with credit card statements showing golf club memberships, weekend getaways, and dinners that cost more than my monthly groceries. Stop this immediately, Mom cried. But I kept going. Slide after slide, 4 years of evidence, every lie exposed. When the last slide appeared, a photo of the banner with the words $84,000. The real story. Written across it, the room was silent. Dead silent. I looked around at them all. My down payment, I said quietly. My MBA. My future. Then, to my surprise, Aunt Judith, Dad's oldest sister, slowly stood. For a moment, I thought she'd defend them. Instead, she began to clap. Slow. Steady. Loud enough to echo. It's about time someone told the truth in this family, she said. A few cousins nodded. Others looked away, ashamed. Mom tried one last time. Family matters should stay private, Kylie. This is inappropriate. Private like the banner on your house? I asked. Sam moved, then crossing the room to stand beside me. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Her standing next to me was enough. For the first time, the golden child and the invisible one stood together, and in that moment, I felt it, the last chain snapping free. 6 months after that dinner, Seattle sunlight spilled through my floor-to-ceiling windows, catching the edge of my coffee mug. I sat at my kitchen counter, stirring honey into my tea, and watching the morning ferries cross Elliott Bay. Across from me sat Sam. Her posture, once sharp and lawyer-perfect, was relaxed. Her hair was pulled into a simple ponytail, no longer sculpted into the kind of perfection our mother used to insist on. I still can't believe they showed up here with those papers, she said, shaking her head. They really wanted to add your name to the deed after everything? I smiled faintly. Their version of an apology, I suppose. And you turned it down. It wasn't a question. I nodded. I already own my own home. I gestured toward the high-rise, visible through the glass. What I need is respect, not a name on a piece of paper. Sam looked at me for a long moment, then laughed softly. You've changed. Maybe, I said, taking a sip of tea. Or maybe I just stopped apologizing for taking up space. 6 months since I'd stood in that living room with the projector and told the truth. 6 months since I'd stopped financing someone else's comfort. 6 months of rebuilding, not the family that was, but something new, something honest. My phone buzzed beside my mug. An industry newsletter notification. Anderson team wins Innovation Award for Compliance Solution. My team. My leadership. Sam noticed my grin. Another win? I showed her the screen. Vice President sounds pretty good before my name, don't you think? She chuckled. Better than mortgage payer in secret. That made both of us laugh. The kind of laugh that felt light. Earned. Real. You're speaking at that finance conference next month, right? She asked. Yeah. Ethical leadership panel. I said with a smirk. Apparently, standing up to financial exploitation qualifies me as an expert. Good. Sam said, raising her cup of coffee. About time someone turned pain into purpose. That evening, I laced up my hiking boots. 3 friends waited by the door, Jessica, of course, plus Tina and Rachel. No guilt, no excuses, no calculations about gas or groceries, just 4 women heading toward Mount Rainier because the wildflowers were in bloom. As we drove, Tina nudged me from the passenger seat. So, Rachel asked about you again. I groaned. The architect? She's persistent, Jessica teased. You could do worse. And so in might Manson worked the router. I laughed, heat creeping up my neck, the good kind this time. Dating without financial anxiety felt like learning how to breathe again. For so long, romance had been something I couldn't afford emotionally or practically. But now, the idea didn't scare me. It felt possible. On Tuesday, I stood in front of 20 young women at the community center. It started as a small side project, a financial literacy workshop, but now the room was packed. Boundaries aren't selfish, I told them. The confidence in my voice surprising even me. They're the foundation of authentic relationships. A girl in the back raised her hand. But what if it's family? This grastry. The room went still. Especially then, I said. Because when you don't set boundaries with family, you end up losing yourself. And then what's left to give? Heads nodded around the room. And in that moment, I realized the version of me who once cried over a canceled transfer was gone. This version could teach others how to stop burning themselves for warmth. A few weeks later, Sam came to visit again. We cooked dinner in my kitchen, pasta sauce bubbling on the stove while Frank Sinatra crooned through the speakers. Mom would have hovered behind us, nitpicking our technique, correcting our every move. But tonight, there was only laughter. When Sam accidentally splashed wine across the countertop, she gasped. Remember when Mom used to measure the pasta portions? 2 ounces for you, 3 for Dad, 1 for me, I said, mimicking Mom's voice. Because actresses need to stay slim. Sam burst out laughing. And now look at us, she said, piling noodles onto her plate. Rebels with carbs. I grinned. We ate until we couldn't move. We talked about childhood patterns we never questioned. About how guilt had disguised itself as love. After a long silence, Sam said quietly, I've been thinking about taking a real vacation. Not one of those fake work retreats. Just joy. Where would you go? I asked. She smiled. Where would we go? Sisters only. The word "we" stuck in my chest. A bridge rebuilt, 1 plank at a time. A year later, I opened a new bank account, but this time, it wasn't for anyone's mortgage. It was for my niece. A seed fund for her education, not from obligation, but from choice. Giving from freedom feels completely different than giving from guilt. At the community center, my financial boundaries workshop had doubled in size. Setting limits isn't about rejecting others, I told the group. It's about honoring yourself enough to show up whole. This state too rebel dies there we human and self-face without him. And 1 for minna now to the destiv wet to castus. I looked around the room at the faces of women just beginning to untangle themselves from similar stories. You are not selfish for choosing peace, I said. You are brave. Later that evening, I sat on my balcony, watching the sunset paint the Olympic mountains gold, then violet, then deep blue. No phone buzzing with emergencies, no guilt in my chest, just the hum of the city and the quiet rhythm of my own breathing. In my journal, I wrote at the top of a clean page, Year 1 of my authentic life. And beneath it, worth isn't measured in sacrifice. Love without respect is just use. Starting over at 30 isn't failure, it's courage. The wind picked up, cool and salty from the bay. I closed my eyes and let it wash over me. For the first time in years, I wasn't bracing for a phone call. I wasn't waiting to be needed. I was simply here, whole, free, finally home in a life that was mine. The Seattle skyline glowed silver under the morning rain as I crossed the street to my favorite cafe, the one tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop that smelled faintly of cinnamon and ink. The barista smiled when she saw me. "Good morning, Vice President Anderson," she teased, handing over my oat latte. I laughed. "You're going to make me blush." 6 months into my new role, the title still felt surreal, not because of the prestige but because it was mine. Something no one could take credit for, explain away, or turn into family leverage. That week, the company had flown me to Chicago to lead a panel on ethical leadership. The irony still wasn't lost on me. As I stepped onto the stage, the lights were bright, the crowd hushed. The moderator introduced me. Kylie Anderson, Vice President of Compliance at Westlake Financial. Her work has redefined integrity-based systems in corporate culture. Applause. Cameras flashing, and for a fleeting second, I imagined my parents watching. Would they be proud, or would they feel threatened by the fact that I'd built this without them? When it was my turn to speak, I paused before the microphone. "Leadership," I began, "isn't about power. It's about responsibility. And sometimes, that responsibility means saying no, even when it's to the people you love." The audience grew still. "Boundaries," I continued, "aren't walls. They're doors with locks and you hold the key." When I finished, the applause felt like a kind of absolution. After the conference, I sat by the hotel window overlooking the Chicago River. My phone buzzed an email from Sam. Subject: "They showed up at my office." I froze. "Sam. Mom and Dad. They wanted to talk about you. About what happened." I told them to stop. That they needed to respect your boundaries. They left. But Mom cried the whole way out. My chest tightened, but I typed back quickly. "Me. Thank you for standing up for me. I know that wasn't easy. Sam. They're still trying to rewrite things, Kylie. Even now. Me. I know. But the truth has a way of outlasting denial." 3 days later, back in Seattle, a small envelope arrived in my mailbox. The handwriting was unmistakable. Mom's. No return address. Just my name. I almost threw it away. But something curiosity, maybe closure, made me open it. Inside was a single folded sheet. Her words, neat, but trembling. "Dear Kylie. I know you believe we wronged you. But parents make mistakes trying to protect their children. We didn't want you to feel burdened, which is why we didn't tell Sam. We only ever wanted the best for you. Love, Mom." I stared at the letter for a long time, then folded it back up. No apology, no acknowledgement, just another attempt to recast manipulation as love. I set the letter down, took a deep breath, and walked to the balcony. Rain fell softly, like the city was washing itself clean. That night, I had dinner with Jessica. She raised an eyebrow when I mentioned the letter. "Let me guess, guilt wrapped in nostalgia?" "Exactly," I said. "Every line reads like a justification." Jessica smiled wryly. "That's because people like that can't face themselves without rewriting the story. But here's the good news, you don't need them to change for you to heal." She was right. Healing wasn't about their apology, it was about my permission. The next day, I stood at a whiteboard in our new Westlake office, mapping out the next phase of the compliance system. Team members clustered around, some fresh out of grad school, others seasoned analysts. "This isn't just about policy," I told them. "It's about people. Integrity starts with how we treat each other." A young analyst raised her hand. "Even when the people breaking the rules are the ones in charge?" I smiled. "Especially then." Laughter broke the tension, and I saw something I hadn't seen in myself for years: confidence that didn't need validation. After work, I returned home to an unexpected email from my university's alumni office. "Dear Miss Anderson, we're honored to invite you as the keynote speaker for our upcoming Leadership and Ethics Symposium." I blinked at the screen. Me, the girl who once ate ramen to keep her parents' house standing, was now being asked to talk about leadership. I laughed out loud, partly in disbelief, partly in joy. Then I texted Jessica. "Guess who's delivering a keynote?" She replied with 3 fireworks emojis and, "Look at you, Miss Boundaries." Weeks turned into months. The rhythm of my life settled into something peaceful: work, friends, hiking on weekends, pasta nights with Sam. Every now and then, Mom would send a holiday card. Polite, formal, always signed by both of them, but written in her handwriting. I didn't respond. But I didn't block her either. Silence, I'd learned, can be its own kind of language. One Saturday, I visited a small bookstore downtown. I was browsing the self-help section when a woman beside me sighed heavily. "These books always make it sound so easy," she muttered. I smiled faintly. "Setting boundaries?" She nodded. My mom guilt trips me every time I try to say no. I just don't want to hurt her. I tilted my head. You're not hurting her by saying no. You're just stopping her from hurting you. She blinked at me, like no one had ever phrased it that way before. Thank you, she whispered. As she walked away, I realized something. I'd become the person I used to need. Months later, my keynote at the symposium drew a full crowd. Standing on that stage, I told my story. Not the polished version, the real one. I talked about love, guilt, and the quiet erosion of self-worth that comes when family becomes a synonym for control. And when I finished, the applause didn't feel like a performance. It felt like a collective exhale, as if hundreds of people recognized themselves in my story. Afterward, a young man approached me, his voice trembling. My dad's been doing the same thing, he said. Calling it helping the family. I thought I was being ungrateful for wanting to stop. I placed a hand on his shoulder. You're not ungrateful. You're brave. He nodded, tears in his eyes. And I realized this was my purpose now, turning pain into a map so others could find their way out. Back at home, as twilight settled over the city, I poured myself a glass of wine and opened my journal. Under year 2, I wrote, silence can be stronger than blood. Kindness isn't weakness. And peace isn't something you earn, it's something you protect. I closed the book, took a long sip, and smiled. Seattle lights shimmered outside my window, a city alive with possibility. Somewhere my parents were still rewriting stories I'd long stopped reading. But I'd written a new one for myself, and this time, I didn't need anyone's approval to believe it. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when the knock came. 3 gentle taps, spaced apart, almost hesitant. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, I froze. Mom stood there, clutching her purse like it was a shield. Behind her, Dad hung back on the sidewalk, his posture stiff and uncertain. Kylie, she said softly. We were in town. Thought we might stop by. For a second, I considered closing the door. Every instinct told me to protect the peace I'd built, but something, maybe curiosity, maybe closure, made me step aside. You can come in, I said quietly. They entered the apartment cautiously, like stepping onto sacred ground. The place was bright, open, filled with plants and sunlight. Everything about it screamed independence. Mom looked around, eyes darting to the framed degree on the wall. Your MBA, she murmured. You finished it. I did, I said. Last spring. Dad nodded once, his jaw working like he was trying to chew words he didn't know how to swallow. We sat at the kitchen island. The silence stretched so long that I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. Finally, Mom spoke. You look happy. I am. I'm glad, she said. Then almost immediately, we miss you, you know. I sipped my tea. You miss what you used to control. Her head snapped up. That's not fair. Neither was what you did, I said softly. Dad exhaled, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Kylie, we made mistakes, okay? We were under pressure. You thought I'd never say no. I interrupted. He froze. The words hung between us, sharp and true. Mom's eyes filled with tears. You don't understand what it's like to watch everything you built start to crumble. We were desperate. You were doing well, and we saw me as a lifeline, I finished. Not a daughter, a resource. Her lips trembled. We didn't mean to hurt you. I know you didn't mean to, I said. But you did. For 4 years, you watched me sacrifice my dreams, and you never once asked how I was doing. Dad looked away. Mom wiped her cheeks. Silence again. But this time, it wasn't cold. It was honest. Finally, Dad spoke. We saw your conference speech. I raised an eyebrow. You did? He nodded slowly. Your sister sent us the link. We watched it twice. Mom's voice was small. You were good. Really good. For a moment, the air shifted, not forgiveness, but recognition. She reached across the counter, fingers trembling. We're proud of you, Kylie. I looked down at her hand, then back into her eyes. I wish that had been enough before, I said. Before I had to lose everything to earn it. Her hand fell back to her lap. I'm sorry. This time, it wasn't a justification. It was small, fragile, real, and even though it didn't erase anything, it landed differently, like the first drop of rain after a drought. They didn't stay long. When they stood to leave, Mom hesitated at the door. Can we try again? I thought for a moment. Maybe. But it'll have to look different this time. She nodded. We'll follow your lead. That was new. After they left, I stood by the window, watching them walk down the street together, smaller somehow, more human. The anger that had once burned like fire in my chest had cooled into something else, not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. Some wounds stop bleeding long before they stop aching, but they ache less when you stop reopening them. That night, I called Sam. They showed up, I said. I figured they might, she replied. How'd it go? Better than I expected, I admitted. Worse than it could have. She laughed softly. That sounds like Mom and Dad. We talked for an hour about work, about her new case, about life. It felt normal. When we hung up, I realized I was smiling, not because everything was fixed, but because I was free enough not to need it to be. A few weeks later, I was invited to a radio interview about my speech at the symposium. The host introduced me as a voice for modern boundaries and ethical leadership. It still made me laugh how the same story that once made me feel small had become the thing people respected me for. When the host asked, what was the hardest part of learning to say no? I didn't hesitate. Realizing that love without respect isn't love at all, I said. It's compliance. He nodded, and the studio fell quiet. That's powerful. Yeah. I smiled. It took me $84,000 to learn it. Right is my no. It nodded just After the interview, I walked along the waterfront, the wind cool and salty. Seattle had become home in every way, Denver never was. Sometimes I'd think about the girl who once sat in her parents' dining room, too afraid to speak. The girl who thought, fine, was enough. I wanted to tell her it gets better. You'll have nights filled with laughter, mornings without dread, and a life that's yours. You'll stop apologizing for the space you take up. You'll stop mistaking loyalty for love. And one day, you'll realize you were never half of anyone. You were whole all along. That weekend, I met Jessica for dinner at a small Italian place near the market. She raised her glass. To freedom that doesn't need permission. I clinked mine against hers. And to friends who remind you that you deserve it. We laughed. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the girl who'd been used. I felt like the woman who'd rewritten the ending. When I got home, I lit a candle, opened my journal, and wrote a single sentence on the next page. Healing isn't a destination. It's a daily choice. And that's first beginning and fell me. I looked around my apartment, the photos of hikes with friends, the framed certificate, the stack of novels by the window. Every object was a reminder. I built this life from ashes, and it was beautiful. The first time I saw my parents' house again, it was by accident. I was back in Denver for a leadership summit, and had an extra afternoon before my flight. Out of curiosity, or maybe old habit, I drove down Maple Street. The same oak tree still stood in the front yard, its branches now thick with spring leaves. The house itself looked smaller than I remembered, a little faded, the paint slightly peeling near the windows, but still standing. The for sale sign out front made me stop the car. Someone had tied a bright red ribbon around the post, the kind realtors use when a deal is pending. After all these years, they were finally selling it. I didn't go in. I just sat there in my rental car, watching a couple walk up the driveway with an agent, pointing, smiling, imagining their future there. For a long time, I couldn't tell what I was feeling. Relief? Sadness? Maybe both. That house had been my childhood, my burden, my $84,000 ghost, and now, it was about to belong to someone else. It felt right. That evening, I called Sam. They're selling it, I said. She paused. The house? Yeah. Well, she said quietly. Maybe that's for the best. Yeah, I echoed. Though part of me still needed to say it out loud, I didn't save it this time. I didn't need to. At the summit the next day, I gave a closing talk about financial ethics and personal accountability. Halfway through, I said something that wasn't in the script. Sometimes doing the right thing for others means betraying yourself. And that's not heroism. That's self-erasure. You can't pour from an empty life. The room went completely silent. When the applause finally came, it felt like a heartbeat. Afterward, one of the attendees, a young woman, maybe 25, stopped me near the elevator. I left my parents' business last month, she said quietly. They told me I was ungrateful. But hearing you speak made me realize I'm not alone. I smiled. You're not. Trust me. She exhaled in relief. Thank you. I watched her walk away, her shoulders a little straighter. That was the moment I understood I hadn't just rebuilt my own life. I'd created a map for others to escape their cages too. When I returned to Seattle, I found a small package waiting at my door. No return address. Inside was a single framed photograph, me and Sam, aged 6 and 9, sitting under that same oak tree, ice cream melting down our hands. Tucked behind the frame was a note in Mom's handwriting. The house will be gone soon. But we wanted you to have this. Love, Mom. That was it. No manipulation, no guilt. Just a gesture. For the first time in years, I smiled at one of her notes. Weeks passed. Summer arrived. My days filled with work meetings, hiking trips, and the occasional date that didn't end in emotional exhaustion. It felt like peace had finally become my normal. Until one morning, Sam called again. Her voice was shaky. They're moving, she said. To Arizona. Near Aunt Gloria. That's good, right? It is. But Dad had a mild stroke last week. My chest tightened. What? Why didn't anyone tell me? I think they didn't want to worry you, she said softly. Or maybe they were afraid you'd think they were trying to pull you back in. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Old instincts stirred the urge to fix, to rush, to rescue, but I didn't. Instead, I whispered to the quiet room, I hope he's okay, and I left it there, because love didn't have to mean losing myself anymore. A week later, an email arrived from my dad. The subject line simply read, "Thank you." I opened it carefully, unsure what to expect. Kylie, I know I haven't said this before, but I've been watching your talks online. You're good at what you do, better than I ever was at anything. I'm sorry for how things went down. I didn't understand back then. I do now. Take care of yourself. Love, Dad. I read it 3 times, tears sliding silently down my cheeks. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't a guilt trip. It was closure. And that was enough. That weekend, Sam flew to Seattle for a visit. We sat on my balcony, legs tucked under us, drinking wine as the city glowed below. Mom told me you got Dad's email, she said. I did. How do you feel? Peaceful, I said honestly. For the first time, I don't need more from them. Sam smiled softly. You know, he told me once that you got your strength from him. I think that's the only thing he was ever right about. We both laughed, clinking glasses. A month later, the Denver house officially sold. I didn't attend the closing. But Sam sent me a photo of the new family standing proudly in front of it, a young couple with a baby wrapped in a blue blanket. Underneath, she texted, maybe some houses are meant to start over too. That night, I walked along the waterfront. The air was crisp, the water reflecting city lights like broken stars. For the first time, I realized I didn't hate my parents. I didn't worship them either. I simply saw them flawed, frightened people who made bad choices. And in doing so, forced me to finally make good ones for myself. I stopped by a flower stand on the way home and bought a single sunflower. I placed it in a glass by the window. A small reminder that growth doesn't come from sunlight alone. Sometimes it comes from breaking out of the pot you've outgrown. The next morning, I woke up early and opened my journal. Year 3 lessons from the house I didn't save. 1. Letting go isn't failure. It's faith. 2. People don't have to admit they hurt you for you to heal. 3. Family love without accountability isn't love, it's comfort disguised as care. I underlined the last line twice, closed the notebook, and smiled. Outside, the sunrise over the sound painted the city gold, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was looking backward. I was finally, completely moving forward. The following spring, I was sitting in my office overlooking the Seattle skyline when a small email notification popped up. Subject: University alumni honoring distinguished graduates. I clicked it absent-mindedly until I saw my name. Kylie Anderson, Vice President of Compliance and Ethics, Westlake Financial Technologies. The university was recognizing me for outstanding leadership and advocacy in ethical finance. Me. The same woman who once rationed instant noodles to pay her parents' mortgage. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. For a moment, all I could think was, I wish Mom and Dad could see this. And then, almost immediately, another thought replaced it. They probably will. Sam would make sure of that. That night, I came home to find an envelope slipped under my apartment door. No return address. Inside was a card with a watercolor of wildflowers and 6 words written in my mother's neat, slanted script. We're proud of you, love, Mom. I traced the handwriting with my thumb. No conditions. No apologies. No manipulation. Just pride. It was the smallest thing, but somehow, it was enough. I didn't cry. I just smiled, placed the card on my desk, and whispered, thank you. Channel. No have the grade. Later that week, I stood in front of a mirror rehearsing my acceptance speech. I'd been invited to speak at the university's gala, a black tie event in the same ballroom where I'd once served as a volunteer waitress during grad school. Funny how life circles back. When the night arrived, the chandelier light glittered across crystal glasses, just like it had that long-ago dinner table at my parents' house. But this time, I wasn't invisible. The dean introduced me. Kylie Anderson represents what we strive to teach: integrity, perseverance, and self-respect in the face of adversity. Applause echoed through the hall. As I stepped to the podium, I took a deep breath. I used to think success meant being everything to everyone, I began. But somewhere along the way, I learned that true success means being whole within yourself, even if it means disappointing others. The room quieted. Sometimes love looks like sacrifice, I continued. But other times, love looks like saying no. And both can be acts of courage. When I finished, there was a standing ovation. Cameras flashed. And for the first time, I didn't shrink from the light. I stood in it. The next morning, I woke up early and sat by my window with a cup of coffee. The city outside felt softer somehow, like everything had slowed down enough to let me breathe. On impulse, I pulled out a piece of stationery and began to write. Dear Mom and Dad, I don't know if this letter will reach you or if you'd even want it to. But I need to say it anyway. I forgive you. Not because you asked for it, but because carrying resentment has no place in the life I'm building. You taught me things not always in the ways you intended. You taught me that love without respect suffocates. That silence can be as loud as shouting. That I don't have to lose myself to be loyal. I've made peace with the house, with the money, with the years I gave. I know now that those choices shaped me. They pushed me to stand up for myself, to help others do the same. So if you ever wonder, I'm okay. Truly. I hope you are too. Love, Kylie. I stared at the letter for a long time. Then I folded it neatly and slipped it into an envelope. I didn't address it. Some words are meant to be written, not delivered. That afternoon, I went to the community center. The financial literacy class had doubled again, over 50 women now, seated shoulder to shoulder, notebooks open. Jessica stood at the front beside me. She'd become my co-instructor. Okay, ladies, she said with a grin. Today we're talking about emotional spending, the ways guilt, fear, and family expectations sneak into our finances. I added, money tells a story, but you get to choose the next chapter. A woman in the second row raised her hand. How do you stop giving when your parents still expect it? I smiled gently. You start by realizing you've already given enough. The room fell quiet. You can love them, I said softly, without funding their denial. And you can help them by refusing to repeat the same mistakes. Dozens of heads nodded, and in that moment, I felt it again, that click, that sense of purpose that used to belong only to survival. Now, it belonged to meaning. A few weeks later, I hosted a dinner at my place, just a small one. Jessica brought wine, Sam flew in from Denver, and a few colleagues came too. The table was set with candles and mismatched plates, and the laughter was easy, unforced. At one point, Jessica raised a glass. To the woman who taught me that no is a complete sentence. Everyone laughed. To the woman, Sam added, who finally taught our family what respect looks like. I felt my eyes sting. Don't make me cry in my own kitchen, I warned. But inside, I was glowing. Later that night, when everyone had left and the apartment was quiet again, I found myself standing by the window, the city lights twinkling like tiny lanterns. I picked up my phone and opened the photo of the old house, the one Sam had sent months ago, with the new family smiling on the porch. I zoomed in, noticed a small detail I'd missed before. The oak tree in the background, branches trimmed, but still strong. Time doesn't erase roots. It just lets them grow in a new direction. I turned off the lights, crawled into bed, and whispered into the dark, thank you. Not to anyone in particular, just to life. For every loss that became a lesson. For every silence that turned into peace. For every boundary that led me back to myself. 2 years later, Seattle looked different, or maybe I did. The skyline wasn't just a backdrop anymore. It was home. The hum of ferries in the distance, the smell of roasted coffee drifting from the corner cafe, the rhythm of rain against the glass, it all felt like the heartbeat of a life I'd chosen. That morning, I walked into Westlake's executive floor, carrying 2 things. A steaming mug and a sealed folder labeled resignation. Not because I was running from something, but because I was finally ready for what came next. I'd built what I came here to build. I'd healed what I came here to heal. Now it was time to grow again. When I handed the letter to my boss, Thomas, he looked at me with a mix of pride and disbelief. You sure about this? He asked. You're at the top of your game, Kylie. I smiled. That's exactly why it's time. He leaned back, studying me. You're one of the best I've ever worked with. So, what are you going to do? Teach, I said. Full time. He laughed softly. Of course. Teaching people how to do what you've mastered. Not just finance, I said. Boundaries. Financial independence. Real empowerment. He nodded, reached across the desk, and shook my hand. Go change the world, Anderson. There's on sto promex to one hope 4. We have that Wadacon. That evening, I walked out of the building one last time. The glass doors reflected the city lights, and my own faint smile steady, grounded, unafraid. No tears. No regret. Just gratitude. 3 months later, I stood in front of a classroom at the University of Washington. My name printed neatly across the whiteboard. Professor Kylie Anderson. Ethics and Financial Empowerment. 30 students stared back at me. Some nervous, some eager. All looking for something they couldn't quite name. I took a deep breath. Before we talk about balance sheets or compliance systems, I began. Let's talk about the kind of wealth that doesn't fit on paper: integrity. Der Persed den Saldechigist. No then midi hero process. A few pens paused mid-note. When you let guilt manage your life, you'll spend your time paying off debts that don't belong to you. The goal isn't to build wealth for others' approval. It's to build peace you can live with. They listened, really listened, and as I spoke, I realized I wasn't just teaching theory. I was teaching survival. One afternoon, after class, a young woman lingered by my desk. "My mom keeps asking me to co-sign a loan," she said quietly. "I love her, but I don't trust how she handles money. I feel guilty saying no." I smiled gently. "You don't need guilt to love someone. You just need boundaries to keep love alive." She nodded, tears glinting in her eyes. "Thank you, Professor." As she walked out, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, not validation, but purpose. The kind that lasts. Later that year, I started a non-profit with Jessica, the Balance Project. Our mission was simple: helping women reclaim financial autonomy from family systems that taught them to self-sacrifice. We ran workshops, mentorship programs, even crisis support for those trapped in financial control. Within a year, we'd reached over 1,000 women. At our first annual fundraiser, Sam took the stage to introduce me. "This next speaker," she said, "taught me that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's just the quiet act of saying, 'No more.'" Infector here Sedge. The crowd applauded. And as I stepped up, I saw her, not the sister I used to envy, but the woman who had finally seen me. When the event ended, Sam and I slipped outside, barefoot on the cool grass behind the venue. "I got a call from Mom," she said softly. "They're doing better in Arizona. Dad's health is stable. They asked how you were." I smiled faintly. "And what did you say?" "That you're happy." I looked up at the stars. "Then, that's enough." A few weeks later, a letter arrived in my mailbox postmarked from Arizona. Inside was a small photograph, the two of them, older now, standing in front of a modest house with cacti in the yard. On the back, in Mom's familiar handwriting, "You were right. It did have to look different. Thank you for teaching us that." I sat on the couch holding that photo for a long time. There it was, the full circle I never expected. Not a reunion built on guilt, but a connection built on truth. I placed the photo beside the old one of me and Sam as children under the oak tree. Two different eras. Two different stories. Both finally at peace. Months passed. My teaching schedule filled with bright-eyed students and alumni invitations. Sometimes, during long walks by the waterfront, I'd think about that younger version of myself, the one who once believed love had to hurt to count. I wished I could whisper to her across time, "You were never half the woman anyone said you were. You were just waiting for a world that let you be whole." On the anniversary of the Balance Project's founding, Jessica surprised me with a framed quote for my office wall. It read, "The truth doesn't destroy you, it frees you." Below it, in smaller letters, Kylie Anderson. I laughed when I saw it. "You quoted me?" Jessica grinned. "You're quotable now." That evening, as twilight deepened over the bay, I sat on my balcony, legs tucked under me, a glass of wine in hand. Below, the city hummed, people moving, living, becoming. I thought about everything I'd lost: money, illusions, the family I thought I needed, and everything I'd gained instead: integrity, peace, a purpose that outlived pain. Sometimes life doesn't hand you closure neatly wrapped in a bow. Sometimes, it hands you a mirror and waits for you to see yourself clearly for the first time. I'd finally looked, and I'd finally seen her, the woman I was always meant to be. I closed my eyes, letting the wind move through my hair. Somewhere in Arizona, my parents were watching a sunset too. We didn't need words anymore. The silence between us had become its own kind of love, honest, boundaried, human. And as the first stars blinked into view, I whispered not to them, not to anyone, but to life itself. "Thank you for everything I thought would break me, because it built me instead. The necklace may pass to you, but the truth it carries will always be yours to define. Use it to build, not to bind." I stopped for a moment, smiling at the words. It wasn't a goodbye to the past, it was a conversation with the future. In the weeks that followed, life settled into a rhythm. Mornings began with fresh coffee and quiet walks by the lake. Afternoons were filled with meetings and mentorship sessions. Evenings brought soft music, laughter, and the comfortable silence of people who no longer needed to prove their worth. Sometimes I'd catch myself glancing at the necklace and thinking about how different everything looked now. For years, I'd associated that necklace with what I'd lost. Now, it reminded me of what I'd gained: clarity, strength, purpose, peace. And maybe that was all grandmother had ever wanted for me. On the first day of the new year, snow covered the cottage roof like frosting. I stood on the porch, bundled in a heavy coat, watching the lake freeze over. The reflection of the necklace through the window shimmered faintly in the pale winter light, casting thin ribbons of blue across the frost. It struck me then how fragile and strong legacy could be, how it could both wound and heal. How it could live quietly inside stories instead of objects. Maybe, I thought, every family has its heirlooms. Some wear theirs. Others rebuild them. And perhaps the truest inheritance isn't what's passed down through blood, but what's born out of courage. The courage to say, "This ends with me, and something better begins now." Later that day, I visited grandmother's grave for the first time in years. The headstone was simple. Elizabeth Mitchell, 1931, 2015. Beloved mother, artist, dreamer. I knelt, brushing away the thin dusting of snow, and placed a small sapphire pendant on the stone, one of Lydia's handmade creations. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for seeing me before I ever saw myself. It's not things example tech." The wind stirred, soft but certain. For a second, I could almost swear I heard her voice again, that gentle, steady whisper. "Carry it well, my girl." That night, I drove back to the cottage. The students would return soon for the spring program. Life would continue, new stories would be written, and the necklace would stay right where it belonged, not around my neck, but as part of something far greater. It would be the heart of a place that believed in second chances, in chosen families, and in rewriting what "too successful to deserve" could ever mean. Because if success had taught me anything, it was this. The point was never to deserve love. It was to give it freely until the story itself changed. As the last guest drifted away and the cottage fell quiet, I stood alone before the necklace one final time that night. The sapphires shimmered faintly in the dim light, 5 tiny truths bound by one unbroken chain. For years, that chain had felt like a cage. Tonight, it felt like a crown I forged myself. And as I turned off the lamp, the room plunged into darkness except for the faint blue glow that refused to fade. Little did I know, that light was about to lead me somewhere even legacy couldn't reach. And as Marlene finished her speech, her little voice echoing across the auditorium, I realized something. The inheritance we'd fought for wasn't in money, or property, or papers. It was standing right there, alive, brave, unafraid to speak. The night after Hazel's memorial, I couldn't sleep. The world had fallen quiet. The kind of silence that feels both heavy and holy. The ocean outside my window shimmered under the moonlight, endless, like the years we had spent searching for peace. I opened my notebook, the same one I'd used since the early days of the Trust Project. Its pages were worn, edges curled from time, every word carrying the weight of a life rebuilt from truth. I thought about everything Hazel and I had endured. The betrayal, the letters, the healing, the forgiveness that had taken half a lifetime to learn. And as the waves whispered softly against the shore, I realized something simple. Something so quiet it almost hurt. We had done it. We had finally kept Grandma's promise. We had proven that integrity could outlive greed, that love could survive truth, and that peace, real peace, didn't come from having enough, but from being enough. I looked out the window, the horizon glowing faintly with the first hint of dawn, and I whispered, as if Hazel could still hear me, "You were right, little sister. The money didn't matter. What we built did." This not a Klei's worrying, in not a first a gaze worrying. The first light touched the ocean, and I smiled, because even though she was gone, her laughter still lived in every story we told. Her lessons echoed in classrooms, in families learning to talk again, in strangers daring to be honest for the first time. That was the real inheritance, not a trust fund, but a trust rebuilt. And as the morning rose, I closed my notebook and said the words that felt like both an ending and a beginning. "We kept our promise, Grandma. The world trusts again."